Today we're going to talk about the Calculate Payroll process for Sage HRMS. You can find this located in Payroll, Process Payroll, and over in your Calculate Payroll button. So we're going to go ahead and go into our Calculate Payroll button. A couple of the items that we want to take a look at that we can see here on this page is our payroll run date. The payroll run date is the date you run this function. The system defaults at this field the session date you are entered into the open payroll company dialog box when you started Sage HRMS. If necessary, you can change the run date. The next one is going to be our payroll period end date. In the payroll period end date field at the top of the Calculate Payroll window, the system displays the session date you entered in the Open Company dialog box when you started Sage HRMS Payroll. Be sure to enter the correct pay period end date. When you calculate payroll, the system processes only those time cards that you have the same pay period end date for, and it's entered in here. The payroll calculation uses this pay period end date to determine if an employee's hire date falls after the pay period end date. Payroll will not calculate the employee at that point. If the employee's termination or inactive date falls before the period end date, payroll will not calculate for that employee either. If the employee earnings or deduction start date is later than the date period end, then the earnings deduction on this is not included also in the payroll deduction. If the employee earnings or deductions date is earlier than that, it will not populate that either. If an employee accrual's carryover date is earlier or the same as the pay period ending date, the system carries over the next year and accrual hours and dollar amounts up to the maximum carryover for the maximum accrual for that specified earnings or deduction code. The next one over here is going to be our check date. We enter the check date you want to print on the checks for us. The next one down there is our selection list. So the selection list, you can designate employees for payroll calculations by choosing a selection list where you would create that in the employee selection window. This system will calculate payroll for the employees on the selection list who are paid according to the selection pay frequencies. And you are in the range and include employees in selected classes. Also, one of the other things we have is our pay period. The pay period here, the pay period, which is optional. You can help to keep track of your payroll periods. Enter any number in the field if you want to store it as a reference item. You could use this for customizing print forms, reports, such as customized check stubs. The next is to create the EFT file. Select this one here to do the EFT, the payroll run, if you want to include employees who are set to have direct deposit. To select only a few employees in the direct deposit, you can set up the selection list or specify a range of employees with that option on them. The next one is going to be our process. Down here, we have a couple of items to choose from. All checks, advances only, ignore zero and negative checks, and ignore negative checks. In the process of the Calculate Payroll window, you can choose any type of these processes. All checks would be selected for options to print all of the checks. Advance only, select this if you want the system to include in the payroll run only non-taxable payroll advances that you have assigned to employees on the employee payroll window. If you select this, the system ignores time cards and all other employee pay information and calculates only cash advances, non-cash advances, and taxes on the cash advances are not calculated. If you do not select this, you must enter time cards to process employee advances. The next one is to ignore and negative checks, zero and negative checks. We'll select this to skip employees whose checks have zero or negative amounts, so we don't process a check with that in there. And the last one is just to ignore those negative checks. We'll select this to skip employees whose checks have negative amounts because sometimes we do actually pay people with a zero check, so it would depend on your process for that. Then we have the frequency tabs we have listed here. The frequency tab here is the employees in their frequency. So depending on how many frequencies you have in your payroll, you might be paying some people weekly and some people bi-weekly, depending on how you have them set up. So we would select that employee frequency group that we have. And then after that, over here on the right hand side, we have include earnings and deductions frequencies. So when we set up the Sage HRMS for the earnings and deductions, each earnings and deduction was given a frequency to help us to indicate whether this is going to be paid at this point in time. For those of you coming from ABRA, this is a little bit like the setup when you process your payrolls, and in the earnings or deductions, you have it set to pay on the first, the third, or the fifth payrolls of the month, the second, or the fourth. So this is the same type of process, and we can see that process by coming over and looking up our earnings and deductions, and we can see inside each one we have a frequency. The frequencies are going to eliminate or add to us whether we're going to be paying that in this period. So for instance, the commission would be under a monthly frequency and bonuses would be under a 13 per year. With that in mind, that indicates over here that in here we have our monthly. So if we wanted to pay those commissions, we would select that commission here. If we had any of the others, we would also put those under the 13. Each setup is going to be a little bit different based on the way you are processing your payroll and what earnings and deductions that you have. So the determination of exactly what should be selected here, your Sage HRMS consultant will help you to figure that out and then direct you into what items you would need to select for that. I'm going to go ahead and take these off for the moment so that we can take a look at what we've got when we actually do process. A couple of the other tabs we have is our selection tab. This is where we can actually process one employee at a time. So if we want to do one manual check, or we can actually process based in classes set up within our system. So if we wanted to calculate, maybe our pay groups might be here in some of our classes, or it might be just a group of people that we can choose to process for, and we can select that here in our from and to and which classes we like. Start dates here are just letting us know the start and stop dates that we have, and if we are using any optional fields, then you would be instructed by your HRMS consultant as to how you would use this. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and process this payroll real quick. As it processes, it's going to go through and select the employees that we've got up there, and it's going to give us at the end an exception report. The exception report is a great tool. It's not necessarily things that are completely wrong, but it's things that may be completely right. So we want to take a look at that always and make sure that we review it to the best of our ability. So we're going to go ahead and say yes to that report so that it pulls up. Give it a second there, and let me blow it up so we can all see it a little bit better too. So within this report here is the company and the payroll processing exception report. So this report is just letting us know things that are in the process that we might need to be aware of. If we start at the top, we can see the employee ID and the name, the earnings or deduction code that it's referencing, and the short description. On the right hand side, it's giving us a message for that. This one is indicating that the end date has passed. So if we were expecting this prescription drug to be coming out, it's not going to come out of the employee's paychecks because the end date is passed. If we need to, we can stop the process, go back and fix these prescription dates and go ahead. It's also going to give us other items like the loan numbers. So for this individual here, for this code and the loan, it's letting us know that the lifetime maximum has been reached. So she has reached her goal for her loan and it will no longer be coming out. Another one it might let us know is that if the employee is receiving a check that is less than zero. Now we did indicate that we did want to override any zero or negative checks, but it still is going to give us a message here to let us know that the employee does have a zero check. So if he's not supposed to, we can go back and take a look to see the calculation and make sure we have everything the way it should be. Not only does it give us the end dates, it's also giving us start dates not reached. So if an employee has some deductions, but the date has not started yet, it's going to let us know that here so that we can make sure that everything works there too. One of the other items here is this one, which is our earnings and deductions pay frequency not selected. This is an example of not selecting the correct pay frequency on the very first field that we were talking about. If I would have check marked the one that said commissions and it was set for monthly, then it would let me know that this would going to be paid. This was telling me that I did not select it, and if I'm expecting commissions to come out of this payroll, they will not be coming out unless I go back and recalculate that. Another item that might kind of pop up is the valid EFT bank numbers. So there could be some issues with that. It'll let us know here that we might need to go back, pull up this employee, make sure that they are okay in their setup, and make any changes, come back in and recalculate payroll. Once we have this taken up, we can stop our and go back into all of our setups. If I come back and do my other items here, and go ahead and process, it's going to come up with another message here. It's allowing me to erase everything that was prior, go ahead and merge it, or cancel the entire process. I'm going to go ahead and erase here so that we get a brand new setup. And we're going to go ahead and let this calculate. And once we get our exception report back, it's going to come in and give us a change. So we'll let this process here real quick. So we have a new exception report. And down here on the bottom, you'll see that that frequency message has gone now, and it has let us know that it is now going to be paid if that employee does in fact have any type of commissions that needs to be earned. So once we have processed this, we want to take our list, make sure we have our changes. Some may be good, some maybe we need to address. We go back and forth, make those changes, come back in and recalculate our payroll and keep moving forward until all the exception list items are correct. And then at that time, we're going to go and take a look at our pre-check payroll register.